So the Israelites, they had to carry all of this through the desert for 40 years.
Wow.
And when they carried it, they did not carry it as one big building like we see here, but they had to take it apart piece by piece and transport each piece individually. The main pieces were these big wooden boards of acacia wood covered in gold. Each one of these boards or panels was 1.5 cubits wide by 10 cubits tall. There were 48 of these panels in total, 20 on one side, 20 on the other side, and 8 in the back.
Wow.
Each panel had a number of things that held it in place to keep it from falling apart, like these hooks that they were attached to one another, as well as these poles also made of acacia wood covered in gold. And in addition, each panel had 2 blocks of silver, if you look down here. Blocks of silver, pure silver, that each weighed between 70 to 80 pounds of pure silver. Trivia question: who knows who did all that hard work, all the logistical work of carrying the tabernacle?
The young men.
The Levites?
The Levites.
The Levites, correct. The priests also were from the tribe of Levi, but they did all the holy work. And the rest of the Levites, who were not priests, did all of the logistical work. So, does anyone want to guess how many Levites it took to carry the tabernacle?
Oh my goodness.
What was that?
Several hundred.
100?
Several hundred?
6,000.
Several hundred? 6,000?
50.
50?
400.
6,050?
2,000.
2,000?
Wait, the price is right.
I'm sorry.
So, so the numbers, the book of Numbers gives very precise numbers of Levites. It gives detailed descriptions of the different groups and families that the Levites were divided into, and it says exactly how many men from each group helps carry the tabernacle. When you put the numbers in the calculator and you add it all up, it adds to a total and precise number of 8,580 men.
Oh my
Did all that hard
goodness.
work. So whoever
85,
said 6,050.
8580.
How often did they do it?
I said 5,000.
You missed.
Or whatever.
A little bit.
Just a few, it's okay.
So, yeah, so 8,500 men between the ages of 30 to 50 who would repeatedly take it apart, rebuild, again and again and again until they finally reached the promised land.
Did they carry it bodily?
What was that?
Did they carry it bodily, or did they
So
have carts
the,
or something?
The 6 holy items had to be carried by hand, and the rest of the pieces were carried on wagons or carts pulled by animals.
Yeah, good question.
So,
Sorry, 6 holy items, you mean the
yeah, the altar, the wash base, the showbread, the menorah, the altar of incense, and of course the Ark of Covenant.
What about the fencing?
The fencing also, they had to take it apart and rebuild each time.
How often would they have done that?
How often? That's a very good question.
Nobody knows, but
Well, let's start before we answer how often, how did they know when to stop and when to keep moving?
yeah, the cloud,
Exactly.
fire.
Exactly, the pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire by night.
Right.
Whenever it moved, they knew that it was time to pack up and get going. And
Ah.
whenever it stopped, then they knew that it was time to settle down and rebuild. The answer to how often, is that it was actually very inconsistent. It was not the same amount of time each time. The vast majority of those 40 years was actually spent idle and not moving. So, for example, they would, let's say, settle for 2 or 3 months and then walk for 3 or 4 days and then settle for a couple of months. So, the vast majority of the time was not moving. There were even a couple of stops where they did not move for like a year or two. So they had to be ready every single day. At any given moment, they had to be ready to pack up and get going because they did not know when it was time, when it would be time.
Do we know how long it took to put it up and take it down?
We don't know exactly, but my speculation is that just based on the sheer number of people and how organized they were, each person knew exactly what they were doing. I imagine that it probably took less than 2 hours to pack up and get moving.
Really?
But that's speculation.
Where would you say that it was? Where were they primarily idle? Is there some specific areas where you'd say they were primarily idle?
Yes, we know actually the exact locations, or almost the exact locations. There were 42 stops along the way over the course of 40 years. We know 2 of the stops are very close by, in Avrona and Yotvata, which is just a 15-minute drive away from here. They did not pass through Timna, but yeah, we know two of those places that are very close.
Sorry, the first one, Ain. Yotvata,
And Ein Ivona.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, Ein Ivona would have been first because it's south of Yotvata.
Arabia, or sorry,
Saudi Arabia.
no, the Mount Sinai. They would have parked in their Mount Sinai for a while.
I think I think that's where they spent the most time, actually, if I'm not mistaken. I think they were there for about 2 years. But I need to look up on that.
Okay.
All right.
Questions?
Yes.
Do you know whether it has rained at all during those 40 years of those millions of people raining?
It probably did. It probably did. It rains here, not very often, but it rains sometimes. It rained like about a week ago. Not very much. For like maybe 20 minutes.
What would they
What
do
about
during
roses?
their downtime if they had all